بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الخلق وسيد المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. Good to see everyone. Jazakumullah khair, guys, for coming back and you showing up. Alhamdulillah for the opportunity to get together, inshallah, study, learn, and inshallah commit to that change in our lives. I mean, there's always growing pains with everything in our lives, but our souls need reflection, need meditation, need discussion. So this is you essentially giving your soul and your heart a breather in life and paying attention to that aspect of your well-being, which is very important, right? Oftentimes we go through life, we're just not paying attention to our souls and neglect the fact that our souls require a regimen of study, a regimen of commitment, a regimen of reflection. And the Quran is designed to bolster your soul, to anchor your heart so that you can navigate the journey of life. Alhamdulillah, we started last week with reflection on this beautiful story of Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, his own trials in life, and how we've seen how trials in life really, if the stories of the prophets have shown us anything, is that most of our challenges are at home, right? And that throws off a lot of people in life when they see that their own family situation is very challenging, right? But guess what? The prophets of Allah Azza wa Jal have encountered the most difficult and heartbreaking experiences within their own homes. And we discussed last week how Prophet Ibrahim managed a very difficult relationship with his father, and how he drew the boundaries, but kind of balanced that need to be dutiful and kind to his father and his parents and his community while upholding principles. And we spoke about this beautiful dua that manifested his desires, right? So again, I pray to Allah that you've had a chance to reflect on that dua from Surah Al-Shu'ara, where he asked, remember, for wisdom, the decision-making ability in his life, where he asked for being joined with the righteous, the VIP club, and how he asked for honorable mention of his name after he has departed from this life, because our lives may actually be extended beyond our death if we have really connected to Allah and left something positive behind us. But that was his keen desire. I don't want to live my life. I want my life to be emulated. I want the lessons that I've attained in my life to be passed on to the next generations. What a beautiful thing to live a life of purpose like that. And Allah, we spoke of how he fulfilled his dua because of his sound heart. And we concluded the session talking about the sound heart. How the sound heart, your sound heart is the gift. That's the greatest gift. That's the number one organ you need to work on in your life. Oftentimes we think it's our minds, but it's really our hearts. That's going to change the equation for you. That's going to be your wild card in this life. That's really what determines what you ultimately attain in this world, but in the next life. That's where Allah is looking at. He's looking at your heart. And we have this need to constantly work on our hearts and manage our hearts and cleanse our hearts, but it's not a trivial thing to say. So we're going to inshallah talk more about hearts today, bi'idhnillah. So let's inshallah pick up with this next topic, this next theme. So what I want to navigate with you today is this whole idea of how to get through the difficult moments of our lives, getting through those heartbreaking moments that can really rattle us. How do we, whenever we're tried hard in life, whenever we're confronted with difficult experiences that really are painful, that ache you deeply, that touch you deeply, be it from people, be it from the difficult circumstances of life, from the adversities, no doubt these trials take a toll. Take a toll on us emotionally, take a toll on us spiritually, psychologically, mentally. And those heartbreaking moments in life, brothers and sisters, they're going to do there are two possibilities or scenarios as to what they can do to you, to your heart. They'll either, let's say, a moment of grief, profound loss in your life. You lost a friend, you lost a dear one, you lost a career, you lost whatever it is, something precious in your life, and you got disconnected from it. Or some hard news have come to you, whatever it is. And think of that moment, for example, of profound grief in your life, right? It can either overwhelm you and overwhelm your heart. It takes over. And oftentimes when we're overwhelmed by difficult news, by difficult circumstances that leave us really sad, we start to meditate on that. You know the effect, first of all, on your heart. It's very painful. It can be traumatizing. We literally use the word breaking my heart. You broke my heart, and it's not easy to overcome that. But imagine if all we do is dwell on that, meditate on that breakage of one's heart, on that ache. And if your mind is constantly circulating around this, think of the possible effect. Think of the psychology that happens to you afterward if we allow those moments to overwhelm us completely. Think of how often people get depressed and how they start to retreat from life. These are actually some of the symptoms of depression. They start losing interest in sleep, in food, and they lose sleep. They have a hard time maintaining that stability. They have a hard time even talking. They start to cry, sob, right? How often have we found ourselves? And by the way, crying and sobbing is the body's natural way of coping with grief. We oftentimes do not understand this. And this is going to be one of the main questions we address today, like dealing with grief and whether we respect the process of grieving in our lives and how do we help ourselves and help others. But as you can see, allowing that moment to expand, to overwhelm and fill your life completely can lead us to depression. And oftentimes getting over that edge, like losing ourselves, so to speak, and it's not a pleasant thing. It has devastating consequences. The alternative, of course, is not to allow that moment to overtake our lives completely. We need to let it kind of run its course. But how do we manage that moment is really the key question. We oftentimes bring up the concept, for example, of patience as a tool, right? But what is patience is about from the Quranic perspective? How do I muster that patience? What is the proper understanding of patience? What is actually a good form of patience? And what is a poor form of patience? How much do we need patience in our lives? And again, how do we manage those moments, heartbreaking moments, so that we can get through these experiences and it doesn't mean, by the way, not feeling sad and not feeling that grief and not feeling that heartache. It doesn't mean it. And you're going to see that it doesn't also mean not crying. But it means getting through it with the proper tools to enable you to get through it and perhaps find strength at the end. And how else how also can we connect actually in a deeper way to Allah Azza wa Jalla through these extremely hard, difficult moments without feeling deformed. Oftentimes through trials of life, through a severe heartbreak, and I tell you, I see a lot of people who have lost even their faith through heartbreaking moments, through their grief, because they started to question Allah. So the question again today is, how do you not only connect with Allah, but to deepen the bond with Allah through heartbreaking moments, but also maintain a good opinion of Him. Maintain that perspective that Allah is beautiful, that what happened to you is actually beautiful despite the pain of it. Those are the questions we want to unravel, inshallah, today. These are very critical questions. We need them in our lives. And we're all going through heartbreaking moments, right? So believe me, brothers and sisters, pay attention to this. This is inshallah something that is going to be serving you in life, and it's going to enable you to serve others in your life, because we have people in our lives that are going to struggle, and you yourself are going to be playing different roles in your life. And we spoke about how we want to address those roles, inshallah, in the halaqah series. You're going to be a father, a mother. Can you imagine if you cannot manage your own grief, how are you going to manage the grief? Help your children, help your spouse, help your parents, help your friends. How do you show up for them when they're grieving? What should you say to them? How should you be present for them? I don't care what you're going to end up doing in your profession, be it a doctor, teacher, right? Engineer, whatever it is that you're going to need this. The best professionals, even in life, are those who bring a heart and a soul and empathy. So this is very relevant, and the Quran brings it up because the Quran is real, the Quran is pragmatic. The Quran is there to help aid you in your life, to aid you in your growth, to aid you in your ability to heal. It's a wallahi book of healing and growth. So inshallah we see this beautiful passage in the Quran that really goes to the heart of this in Surah Yusuf, as you're aware, because the Surah Yusuf is a surah of life. It's your story and my story in a way, although on a bigger, grander scale. But the struggles that he went through, his family went through, speak to many of our struggles. So we pick up in this passage that speaks of this profound grief from the father of Yusuf alayhi salam. Verse 80 on, we're going to talk about a few verses. So what's the context? What's the backdrop? The backdrop, you're aware of Surah Yusuf. We don't need to go through the details, but we're at this juncture in the story where you know very well what's happening. First of all, you have a father, and if you talk about a father that is supposed to have good, righteous children, it's Yaqub alayhi salam, but he happens to have 12 children. And how many of them are wicked again? And abusive and cruel and insensitive? 10 of them. Can you imagine? 12 children, 10 of them, right, have jealousy, malice in their hearts, hate, and they really want to get rid of their brother Yusuf. You know what they've tried to do? They conspired, lied to their dad. Can you imagine? 10 children conspired to lie to a prophet, father who's a prophet. So if there is a household of righteousness, that should have been the household of righteousness, right? So I speak to many parents. I say, hey, listen, because they complain to me, oh, my children are this or that. I'm like, listen, Yaqub alayhi salam had 10 children, not one or two who really messed up. Not just a little messed up, that they did a couple of, created a couple of problems or crashed the car or, right, had a girlfriend or boyfriend, whatever. Like, no. They try to kill their own sibling. Can you imagine? Can you imagine finding one day my child try to kill the other sibling? It's like, that's traumatizing. It's like, where did I go wrong, right? I have parents whose children are, subhanAllah, causing them a lot of trouble in their lives, and they tell me, like, where did I go wrong? I say, you don't have to have gone wrong anywhere. It's just fate. It's qadr, right? We try our best, but life is hard. Imagine the trauma of Yaqub, that 10 of his children deprived him of his own child. So we know what happened. Yusuf ended up being thrown into a well and then kidnapped, sold as a slave, ended up in a foreign state, foreign country, so far from his, like, hundreds of miles away from his family as a young child, 11 or 12 years of age, and then ends up in the house of the Aziz, the story. And then he encountered a whole range of experiences of temptations from his wife. Oh my goodness, talk about the struggles of life, right? And here he is in the story. We know what happened. He ended up in prison, right? Further, and to just kind of, as a statement of principle, he stuck to his principle, and Allah protected him. And he said, I prefer the prison over being vilified and having my honor disgraced in any way. So they put him in prison, though he knew he was innocent. 10 years, can you imagine? And he still maintained his righteousness and uprightness. That's not an easy thing to say. You were in prison for 10 years. He still kept the hope in Allah. Think of the darknesses. Think of these low moments. He kept his hope in Allah Azza wa Jalla. And Allah indeed saved him. He emerges out of the prison and he saves Egypt, right? With his ability to interpret dreams and his knowledge. And here he is now being appointed as the Aziz, the one who's in charge of the treasury of Egypt. So Allah suddenly honored him, catapulted him to great heights, despite all the attempts of his siblings to crush him, suppress him, but Allah elevated him because nobody can stand in the way of Allah. What happens? There's famine now in the region of their family. So the father sends the siblings to Egypt to get some food. All of them go. He didn't want to leave that child with them, Binyamin, but they take Binyamin with them, the other beloved child, and they ended up in the court of the Aziz. They didn't recognize it was their brother, Yusuf, but it was their brother Yusuf, and he recognized them. And he devised this scheme to keep his brother with him, Binyamin. He wanted to really, teach them a lesson. So they schemed this thing where they made it look like Binyamin stole the cup of the king. But he didn't steal the cup of the king. And he told his brother, I'm going to put that in your belongings and the camel to make it look like you stole it so that I can keep you here, right? Because if he stole, then he has to imprison him. So anyway, he did that, and the brothers lost their minds because they made a commitment to their dad to bring back Binyamin, right? He ended up keeping Binyamin, and they went back to their father to tell him the news that your second child got captured. Can you imagine now the trauma? So we're talking about now double trauma. We're talking about 30, 40 years later of a heartbreak of Yaqub, of not knowing where his child is. Ask any parent, they'd rather know that their child died than thinking that their child is missing for years. a lot, like it's torture so he had to live through that trauma for 3-4 decades minimum, not knowing where Yusuf is, but he kept the trust in Allah Azza wa Jal. What do you think his condition was? Do you think he was just kind of living the life? No. Because of his faith? No. He was devastated. He was so sad. And Allah speaks of his profound sadness. So we automatically see that sadness does not negate faith. They can actually coexist. There's a manner in which you manage that sadness and trauma in your life. But now he's going to experience a double trauma. Second trauma of learning the news of the departure of his second child, and without knowing where he is. So here's what we're going to be talking about: the reaction, managing this traumatic moment and dealing with an ugly moment of life, the ugliness of the children who are abusing their father. So the conversation is there, and here they are telling their father, right? Trying to validate their story, telling him, oh, we didn't do anything to Binyamin. You can ask the caravans and they'll prove to you that we're not lying to you. Of course they were lying to their father. They lied so many times, and they lied without any shame, sense of shame. But this time they were telling partial truth, right? And they're trying to validate the story to their father, but nonetheless, he still lost his child. So think of that profound moment in life. Think of the traumatic effect. Think of the devastation, and think of the possible routes that Yaqub can take. Think back to your own story of these heartbreaking moments, the grief that you felt because of the loss of something precious. What did that do to your heart? So Yaqub now had an opportunity, had a choice. He's going to go through additional grief, compounded grief. But how does he manage it? Does he let it overwhelm him? Does he stop and suppress the tears? I'm going to ask you right now, do you need to suppress the tears? Is a key question. Is that what Allah is going to tell us? Suppress your tears, suppress your grief. Just hang in there, endure it, and accept it. Is that what he's supposed to do? What is patience all about? We're going to see fully the divine prescription here. And the whole concept of sabr, patience, being really internalized and embodied by Yaqub alayhi salam. A lesson for all of us, inshallah. So in verse 83, here he is reacting to the moment where the children are talking to him and explaining to him what happened, and his heart is breaking. So what does he tell his children, knowing that they're lying, knowing that they're cruel, knowing that they're heartless? What do you tell them? So somebody's treating you in an ugly, cruel way. Do you, in your moment of anger or profound grief, do you lash out? Inshallah, in the future, we'll talk also about anger. Anger, by the way, they call it a secondary emotion. Oftentimes when you snap, it's not just the anger. There's an underlying emotion. It's either loss of control, grief, fear. It makes a snap, actually. So anger is actually triggered by another emotion that we're not aware of. Notice, times when you're angry, it's because of something else in your heart. But it manifests in anger. Point is, he had an opportunity to also be angry, legitimately. But what does he say in response in that moment where he really lost something beautiful? That's what ugly moments are about. Take something beautiful. He lost his 2 beautiful children, 2 incredibly righteous children, and he's met by an ugly, cruel treatment from his children, the other 10 children. So he tells them this as a response. قال بل سولت لكم أنفسكم أمرا فصبر جميل عسى الله أن يأتيني بهم جميعا. Here's his response to them. He says, no, but your souls have enticed you to this kind of conduct. You've done something, he's telling me. I know you've done something. I don't know what it is, but your souls have enticed you to do something that I don't know about. Of course, Allah knows about it. So what am I going to tell you right now? فَصَبْرٌ جَمِيلٌ. So I'm going to invoke and call upon essentially Allah to give me sabr jameel. فَصَبْرٌ jameel. So I'm going to exhibit, I'm going to try my best to practice in this moment what is called sabr jameel. What is sabr jameel? Sabr in Arabic means patience. Jameel means beautiful. So what is the difference between regular sabr, patience, and sabr jameel? Because that's a statement of Yaqub. So what is this sabr jameel about? That's what we're going to break down. That's the most difficult thing to have in life, and that is your test. The ability, I think somebody raised their hand, inshallah.
Oh yeah,
Mariam,
I
go
have
ahead,
a
please.
question. You said they lied the second time even? So even when Benjamin was taken and they had nothing to do with it?
Partially. Well, they said to him, for example, that he stole. So there was a partial lie. So they said your son stole. He didn't steal, actually, right? So they were still like, they thought he stole, but they were there were still lies in the story, because even when they were talking to Yusuf alayhi salam, no, amongst themselves, they were just still saying wicked things about Yusuf. So it was not a full lie, but they already had a track record of lying. So it wasn't necessarily 100% kind of, but there's still aspects of the story that they were not conveying completely, right, about their intentions. That's what I meant, right?
Oh, because I thought they didn't know that. But
No,
I
they
thought,
didn't. They didn't. But they were saying other things that were lies, even to Yusuf alayhi salam, right?
oh,
Well, not well when they were actually like having their own kind of counsels. For example, they said, "Well, a brother of him stole before." Yusuf didn't
oh,
steal. They know it, but they said it. So I can look up the verse for you where they said this. So they said essentially here in verse 77. They said قالوا إن يسرق فقد سرق أخ له سرق أخ له من قبل. They said if Benjamin stole, then a brother of his stole before. You see their audacity? They were saying this through the process of investigating the crime. So they're still lying. I mean, they might not have told that to their dad. I'm just saying that they're still engaging in lying even at that old age. Make sense?
yeah, thank you.
So Jazakallah khair. It's a very good technical point what you said. So I just didn't want to get into all the details of it. But you're right. It's not like they still told their dad, but they already lost the credibility. And Allah made them pay for it because they were lying in front of Yusuf, saying, and Yusuf absorbed it. They said in front of Yusuf, oh, a brother of Binyamin stole before. And he looked at him like, really? I'm like, I didn't steal, but they didn't know it was Yusuf. See my point? So what does he say again? He says, فَصَبْرٌ جَمِيلٌ. Beautiful patience. I invoke that beautiful patience. It's most fitting right now. I pray to Allah and I hope that Allah will still gather me with all of them one day. So what is he doing right here? First of all, he's exhibiting what's called beautiful patience. What is beautiful patience? And again, what is different about beautiful patience than regular patience? Beautiful means the ability, first of all, it goes to the heart. Patience is not just an act we have in our external limbs. It's not a statement you say. It begins the journey of that experience, that feeling is in the heart right here, that is likely to break and be deformed as a result of a heartbreaking moment in life. So what he chose to do in the moment is to look towards Allah Azza wa Jal and ask Allah to soothe his distressed heart, because it was very distressed. And in that moment, the beauty of it manifested in him thinking well of Allah. That's really what distinguishes patience. So when we speak of patience, oftentimes it means enduring. Just hang in there, accept, like get through it, right? I'm gonna absorb it. I'm gonna absorb the blow. That's not beautiful patience. Beautiful patience is to believe in that moment, despite the ugliness of life, despite the harshness, the cruelty, how people are treating you, that you're not gonna change my opinion of Allah in the moment. That I still see this trial, this loss, even though I do not understand it, as beautiful because Allah is behind it. Even though Allah didn't choose the evil, but Allah permitted this trial. He had no control. So he still maintained that good opinion of Allah, that Allah is beautiful, that Allah's decree is beautiful, despite his pain. By the way, he didn't say, I don't have pain. And we're going to see that shortly. But he maintained a good opinion of Allah. And notice, his heart was not just his heart was having hope in Allah. Wow, how do you have hope in Allah in that moment? Because he did say it. Ask Allah, I still believe that with me right now, having beautiful patience in my heart, having good opinion on Allah, that Allah will deliver beautiful things to me. I don't know when, I don't know how, I don't have to. Allah will bring it. So in that moment, he recognized, Yaqub, that the best thing he can do is actually to have beautiful patience. That's his gift. That's amazing, brothers and sisters. Oftentimes when we go through trials, we try to think of solutions, we try to think of how to get through it and this and that. We don't recognize that the best thing you can experience in the moment is to have beautiful patience. If you're given that in the moment and you recognize it, Allah has given you the greatest gift. It's not just going to get you through it. It's going to actually allow you to attain the greatest, most beautiful outcomes, for sure. So you hanging in there and choosing to have a good opinion of Allah and choosing to say, no, Allah is good. Allah is beautiful. I may not understand this trial, but Allah has wisdom behind it. I just have to really content myself with Allah and be grateful to Him even for the trial. And that no matter how life is treating me, how people are treating me, I'm going to please Allah in this moment and know that the most pleasing thing to Allah right now is to hang in there and have a good opinion of Him and have hope in Him. If you had that feeling in the moment, glad tidings to you. So Yaqub recognized it. He's like, I know what I need in this moment. This is my tool. This is my gift, and I'm not going to pass it up. Before I wish for anything else, I need to have beautiful patience. Wow, brothers and sisters, when our minds are overwhelmed, how hard it is. How hard is it to have that? It's very hard. So if Allah wants the best for you, He'll grant you that ability. He'll grant you that recognition in the moment. So let's keep going. So he recognized it, he attained it, he asked for it, and notice he didn't abuse his children. Why? Because it turns out beautiful patience is not just a feeling in the heart towards Allah, towards life. Choosing to believe that Allah is good, but also manifesting that feeling in your limbs, beginning with your tongue and your hands, that you don't treat the ill with the ill. You don't repel the ill with the ill, the bad with the bad. No, no, no. Patience that is beautiful means beauty. So you have to draw the most beautiful reaction in your limbs. So you notice he didn't say anything hurtful, even though they were hurting him. He didn't meet them with cruelty. He just said truth with his tongue, and his hands didn't do. He didn't beat them up. He didn't shout at them. He didn't rebuke them. He didn't do any of this. He actually gave them hope. He said, I just hope in Allah, firm hope that Allah is going to gather me with all of them. Can you imagine? The heart that is broken is manifesting such beauty. That's beautiful patience. So it's taking place in the heart, showing up in the tongue and in the hands and in your lips. If you have that, that's the greatest treasure of the prophets. That's hard knowledge to learn, brothers and sisters. See, it's easy to learn knowledge in life. You can learn Quran, Hadith, cite information. That's what a lot of Muslims are obsessed with, right? Walking this is what's difficult. Walking this when you encounter challenges with people around you, with your family, with your friends, maintaining that beautiful grace in your heart and in treating them. That's faith, brothers and sisters. Don't be fooled. If you're able to just grasp this concept, embody it in some moments of your life, wallahi, you've attained the greatest of treasures in this life. And that's what we're going to reflect on a lot in our series, inshallah. How to live these realities. Not just talking about them, right? Not just citing a verse on beautiful patience and teaching people. No, no, no. We need to live it, internalize it. Let's keep going. To further elaborate on this beautiful concept of beautiful patience. Now, the question is, does he stop crying? Does he not shed a tear? Because we as Muslims tell people don't cry. How often have we seen this? When people lose someone in their lives, like, stop crying, haram. 3 days of, like consolation and feeling sad, but that's it. Wallahi, we've seen tragedies happen from this. It is so inhuman. And you know what the evidence of that is? That beautiful patience is not about not crying. In the next verse, 84. Allah describes what Yaqub did. وَتَوَلَّ عَنْهُمْ وَقَالَ يَا أَسَفَا عَلَى يُوسُفَ وَبْيَضَّتْ عَيْنَاهُ مِنَ الْحُزْنِ فَهُوَ كَظِيمٌ. Allah says regarding Yaqub alayhi salam, and he turned away from them and he said, how sorry, how extreme is my sorrow over my son Yusuf. How extreme is my sorrow over my son Yusuf. وَبْيَضَّتْ عَيْنَاهُ مِنَ الْحُزْنِ. His eyes were crying so much, and he was so overwhelmed with grief that the colors of his eyes changed and they turned dull white. Can you imagine? It's like not just crying. They started to change color and turned white and lost the ability to see from the amount of tears and the amount of grief. From sadness, Allah says, فَهُوَ كَظِيمٌ, and he still suppressed a lot of that sadness. So what is Allah saying? Now, did Allah, first of all, what is he saying about Yusuf, Yaqub? That Yaqub cried out loud, cried his tears that are endless. For years he was crying tears and continued to cry tears, and then it manifested in his mouth. He said something. He said, Ya Asafa, 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 I'm sad, I'm sad, I'm sad. I have extreme sadness over Yusuf. Did that negate faith? Did that negate beautiful patience? Did Allah condemn him and say, oh, Yaqub, shame on you? What are you teaching people, man? You're teaching them that they should cry when they're tested in life? No, strong men especially, they don't cry. They don't grieve. Their hearts don't break. They don't complain. They don't cry out. He's crying out. And it's recorded in the Quran. Allah came to record this in the Quran till the end of time, brothers and sisters. For you to hear a man, a father, one of the greatest of the prophets, saying, Ya Asafa, oh, how sorry, oh, how sad, how sad, how sad I am, how heartbroken. And he's crying and he lost his eyesight from the grief. Is Allah not validating this? Allah's telling you that's him being human. That's mercy of Allah. Even the tears are from the mercy of Allah Azza wa Jalla. And there's no 3 days of crying. There were years of crying. And in no way did it contradict faith. In fact, faith coexists with pain in the heart. But he didn't notice though. He didn't allow it to overwhelm him. He didn't allow it to take over his heart that he lost his good opinion of Allah. That he lost that faith. That he lost that hope. No, he maintained it. He understood Allah's perfect and he's going to deliver him through this. He didn't know how, but he maintained that belief and trust in Allah, and even in not seeing life as ugly, which is what oftentimes happens to deformed hearts. They start to see everything as ugly. The trauma, of course, trauma is real, by the way. It needs to be treated. Like, you can ask even Muhammad Hudhud, he deals with a lot of, like trauma. Muhammad, you can share, inshallah, later. These are real things, and sometimes we need to get it treated. We're not talking about the mind can be affected, the brain can be affected. It needs to be medically even treated, psychologically treated. So Islam recognizes this, validates that, the effect of trauma in our lives. But within that, sometimes short of, perhaps our, us experiencing even mental illness because of trauma, we experience a lot of moments in life that may not rise to that level, but we need to know how to manage them in the moment, right? Even within ourselves. And here is Yaqub showing us a beautiful prescription that Allah recorded in the Quran. Where do we go next? After he does this, after he cries out loud and shows us those beautiful tears of still faith, sweet tears that cost him his eyesight, his children, his cruel children, still abused their dad. So they said, قالوا تالله تفتأ تذكر يوسف حتى تكون حرضا أو تكون من الهالكين. They're still manipulating their father. That's how messed up they were. They said, oh, father, you're about to fatally kill yourself, experience fatal illness because of you still remembering Yusuf, still dwelling on Yusuf, that you're going to kill yourself, old man. Meaning, get over it. You know what they're doing? Psychological manipulation. They're trying to guilt him into giving up the story of Yusuf. He said, well, we're tired of hearing talk about Yusuf. You're going to kill yourself, old man. Enough. So there's jealousy there, right? But there's also manipulation. And there's rudeness. What should they have done? I'm afraid that many of us do this. When you say to somebody, get over it, stop crying, stop complaining, right? We do this. This thing is a statement of lack of empathy, lack of understanding. And these people were so heartless, they couldn't even empathize with their own father. Instead of saying, Dad, I can't get your pain. I can never imagine your pain. But I understand. I understand you're going through grief, right? I'm sorry. I whatever. Being there, pat him on the back, right? Give him a hug. Just listen. They didn't. They didn't even want to listen to him. Displaying cold heartlessness, right? And Allah says they should have really shown empathy. What is empathy? Understanding somebody's emotions. Putting yourself in their shoes. That's what makes us human. That's your gift, brothers and sisters. Doesn't matter what degrees you have. Doesn't matter what credentials, titles. If we cannot have empathy, kiss your relationships goodbye. All of them. And I'm afraid, again, we as Muslims never really reflected on what it means to cultivate empathy in a real way. And many of us may not have experienced empathy from others. So we don't know how to give it to others. I'm telling you right now, you cannot be successfully married or be a successful parent if you don't have empathy. And you need a lot of empathy. And that is what made Rasulullah ﷺ who he was. That's his genius. That's his gift. Walking like body of empathy and compassion. Feeling the pain of everyone. It's not fun feeling the pain of people. But that's a higher grade for your heart. That's the gift. We oftentimes speak of academic intelligence, right? IQ. What about the emotional IQ? Right? Of really feeling someone. Those moments of connection, it's nothing like them. These 10 children failed in that. Never showed their father any empathy, but instead they wanted to manipulate him and be just abusive towards him. How does he respond again to an abusive moment? Right? Like, I would have yelled. I was like, what is wrong with you? Like, I gave you a chance. I just said beautiful patience, and you're still insisting. You'd say, please leave me alone. You guys are heartless. Right? You might say a statement. Because remember, he said beautiful patience. So his response to his own children is in verse 86, and Allah records it. قال إنما أشكو بثي وحزني إلى الله وأعلم من الله ما لا تعلمون. Look at his beautiful kind of manifestation again of beautiful patience and his grief. And he said, as Allah tells us, I'm going to go to Allah and complain of my grief and my Beth in Arabic. So he said, listen, in a way, you don't get what I'm feeling. I have grief in my heart. Nobody understands it, but I know Allah understands it. Again, that's beautiful patience. Because in the moment, he could have been upset. Like, nobody gets me. Nobody gets me. People are heartless. My own children are messed up. And then the grief turns into anger. Remember, anger is a secondary emotion. He said, no. In that moment, I still want to see Allah and His beauty and His presence. Allah has not abandoned me. Right now, people might not hear me, might not recognize or appreciate my pain, but I know Allah knows my pain. And He's the one who gave me the heart with which to feel pain. I'm going to take my grief to Allah. That's what he said. So I'm going to take my grief to Allah, complain of my grief to Allah. So he's still saying, I have grief. And I'm going to take my Beth. Beth in Arabic means the expression of grief. The bursting out of grief. Wow. So there's Beth. You need Beth. You can't just hold on to that grief in your heart. You need to express it. That's therapy. That's why we need people in our lives to listen to us so that we can process that grief. But he chose to take it first to Allah because nobody around him is listening. What a beautiful therapy that Yaqub taught us on how to manage, again, a profound moment of grief. And then he said, وَأَعْلَمُ مِنَ اللَّهِ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. I know that Allah knows from Allah that which we don't know. What is he saying? I know that Allah will not abandon me. I know that Allah has a bigger, more beautiful plan. I trust in Allah. I choose to not have a negative opinion of Allah despite your behavior. I choose not to despair in this moment. You see, he's still showing trust, faith, hope in his heart, beauty, while feeling sad, profound sadness. But he's still expressing it now to Allah Azza wa Jal. Again, this is the embodiment of sabr jameel and managing that huzn, that profound grief in the heart and responding to the ugly moments of life. Final verse, then he tells them something amazing. So he's still maintaining beauty with his own children, with his tongue. So he said, يا بني اذهبوا فتحسسوا من يوسف وأخيه ولا تيأسوا من روح الله إنه لا ييأس من روح الله إلا القوم الكافرون. He said, oh my children. And he's looking at all of them, 10. He said, go search for Yusuf and his brother. And لا تيأسوا. And don't give up hope in روح الله. روح الله means the spirit of Allah that soothes, that mercy of Allah that soothes your distress. روح, when it comes onto your heart, the روح, it lifts you up. And he believed in it. There's that spirit from Allah. He said, don't ever despair in that, no matter how difficult the moment is. Go. And indeed, the ones who give up on Allah and His mercy are the kafirun, the ones who disbelieve in Him. This is an amazing verse. the heartbroken father is the one giving hope to the children that were abusive, instead of the other way around, right? So in his heartbreak, he can't even see. He's crying. He's complaining of his grief, and he's like, have hope in Allah. I don't want you to break. That's beauty, brothers and sisters. He drew the most beautiful words from his most beautiful heart that had the most beautiful trust in Allah. Close the chapter, and then we pick up, the next scene would be with them in Egypt visiting with Yusuf. But I wanted to close it here. That for me, brothers and sisters, spoke to me today in my life, right? Every single time, Allah, I visit with this incredible commentary, divine commentary on grief, on managing it, on trauma, on tears. I say to the Muslims, where are we? Like, did we listen to this? When we go to grieving mothers and say, get over it? When we say to them, 3 days of grief only, right? When we say to men, stop crying, men shouldn't cry, right? Rasulullah ﷺ shed tears. And he said, my heart is sad, right? Permission to be human is at the heart of our faith. Permission to be human. But not letting the moments overwhelm us that we start to have deformed views of the world and of Allah. That is where the difference is, right? So it can take you up or it can take you down. Eventually what happens? Because of his beautiful patience, Allah gathered him with his children. So for sure, beautiful patience is not just going to get you through it. No, Allah is going to make you experience the most beautiful outcome. See, there's good in the trial, and you'll only attain the good of the trial if you have beautiful patience and trust in Allah. In a way, like Yaqub was thankful to Allah for the trials. Like, I know amazing things are going to happen. I'm still sad, right? But I know it's going to all work out. So I know it's a moment to thank Allah for. That's amazing. While you're going through hardships that you say, wow, this is beautiful. I know it's meant to be here. Allah's with me. Allah hasn't abandoned me. I'm going to choose from my heart to think good thoughts of Allah. And my tongue to say the right things right now. And it doesn't mean I don't cry or I don't complain. Some people misinterpret these verses to mean don't complain to people. No, it doesn't say that. When he said, I'm going to complain to Allah, it's because his children were refusing to listen to him. Talk to Allah and talk to empathetic people in your life. You need it to get through life. When we suppress the grief and the tears, it breaks us. It breaks us. It's a natural human way of dealing with grief that Allah gave you. We ask Allah to grant us beautiful patience through the trials of life, because the trials of life are endless, to make us among those who attain this greatest of gifts. Because Allah said in the Quran, whoever is granted beautiful patience are the winners. They're going to win the ultimate prizes in this world and in the next world. These are the highest caliber people in creation, the best of souls. Wallahi, it's a training that we need with it, but you got to start with asking Allah for it. Say, Allah, pour patience on me. And being there, one of the also lessons we need to reflect on is how to now help people who are grieving. What is grief counseling is about? I say to people, you don't need to be a counselor or a therapist, but be present, empathize. And don't make it about you. Tip, when somebody's grieving, somebody is not feeling well in front of you, don't say, well, oh, see, get over it because my problem is, you should have seen what I've gone through, or the people in Syria are going through harder problems. That's the worst thing we can tell somebody who's grieving. No, their grief is real. Validate it. Say, I cannot imagine what you're going through, right? And be real, be present, listen, give them a hug, right? Don't lecture them, but don't suppress them. Be wallahi, that is your presence there for them. Allah will be present for you. Wallahi, Allah will reward you in incredible ways. Like you showing up for people when they're going through hardships like that is your blessing. They actually blessed you by you being present for them. They're helping you because you showing up to help and aid others is your gift. So think about, again, not only how you manage your own grief, but also how you help the grief of others. Do you run away from that? And also when we go through grief, do we escape to addictions, to distract ourselves? That's what usually people do. These are some of the things we need to pay attention to in our life. So anyway, inshallah, I'll end here.